"Security, get this man out of my dealership. Now." Victoria Sterling's voice cracked like a whip across the showroom. She pointed her manicured finger at the black man in paint-stained work clothes, her face twisted with disgust. "People like you don't belong here. This isn't a museum. It's a place for serious buyers." The man didn't move. He just looked at her with calm, steady eyes. What Victoria didn't know, what no one in that building knew, was that 3 weeks ago this nobody had signed the papers that made him her boss, and he had heard every single word. Comment your city below. Let's see how far this story travels. Marcus Thompson killed the engine of his old Ford pickup and sat there for a moment, hands still gripping the wheel. 42 years on this earth, 23 years in construction, exposed to the heat, the cold, the concrete, the chaos. And now here he was parked in the lot of a luxury car dealership that had his name on the ownership papers. His name, Marcus Jerome Thompson. The kid from South Central who used to steal bread from the corner store just to feed his little sister. He looked down at his clothes. Paint-splattered jeans, work boots caked with dried mud, a faded gray t-shirt with a small tear near the collar. His hands were rough, calloused, the hands of a man who had built his fortune one brick at a time. Perfect. This was exactly how he wanted to look today. Marcus stepped out of the truck and walked toward the glass doors of Prestige Auto Gallery. The California sun beat down on his shoulders, but he barely noticed. His mind was elsewhere, thinking about the phone call he'd received last week. "Mr. Thompson, there have been some complaints," James Chen, his regional director, had said carefully. "Nothing concrete but whispers, customers feeling unwelcome, staff making judgments. I thought you should know." Marcus had listened without interrupting. When James finished, he asked only one question. "Has anyone told them who the new owner is?" "No, sir. You asked us to keep it quiet." "Good. Keep it that way. I want to see something for myself." And so, here he was. Not as Marcus Thompson, owner of Thompson Construction and now Prestige Auto Gallery. Just as Marcus. A black man in work clothes walking into a world of chrome and leather and money. He pushed open the heavy glass door. The cool air hit him immediately, carrying that unmistakable scent of wealth. Leather polish, something faintly floral. The showroom stretched before him like a cathedral, every surface gleaming, every vehicle positioned to catch the light just right. But Marcus wasn't looking at the cars. He was looking at the people. Near the reception desk, a group of employees had gathered. A woman in a sharp blazer held a clipboard, gesturing while she spoke. 2 younger salesmen nodded along, laughing at something she'd said. A security guard leaned against a pillar near the entrance, scrolling through his phone. The laughter stopped when Marcus walked in. He felt it immediately, that shift in atmosphere, that sudden silence that falls when someone is being assessed, measured, judged. He'd felt it 1,000 times before, in banks when he applied for his first business loan, in restaurants when he took clients to dinner, in country clubs when he tried to golf with potential investors. It never got easier. You just got better at pretending it didn't hurt. The woman with the clipboard looked him up and down. Her eyes traveled from his muddy boots to his paint-stained jeans, to his rough hands, to his unshaven face. Something flickered in her expression. Dismissal, disdain, decision. She turned back to her colleagues and said something under her breath. One of the younger salesmen, slicked back hair, expensive watch smile that never reached his eyes, glanced at Marcus and smirked. He leaned toward his colleague and muttered, "Bet you $20 he asks for directions to the nearest bus stop." The other man laughed. Marcus heard every word. He moved deeper into the showroom, his boots making soft sounds against the polished floor. He stopped beside a silver sports car, sleek and beautiful curves like liquid metal. He reached out and let his fingers trace along the hood. "Excuse me." The voice came from behind him, sharp, annoyed. Marcus turned to find the young salesman approaching. His name tag read Derek, and his expression carried the particular condescension of someone who believed he was doing a favor by acknowledging your existence. "Can I help you find something?" Derek asked. "Just looking around," Marcus replied. "Nice cars you've got here." Derek's eyes flicked to the vehicle Marcus had been touching. "That's the new model, very popular with our clients. Starting price is around 200,000. He let the number hang in the air like a challenge. Marcus nodded slowly. "That's quite a car." "Yes, well." Derek shifted his weight, already losing interest. "Most of our inventory is in that range. We cater to a very particular clientele." The way he said particular made his meaning crystal clear. Before Marcus could respond, someone called out from across the showroom. "Hey, Derek, your client from Beverly Hills is online too. Something about interior options." Derek's entire demeanor transformed. His posture straightened. His smile became genuine. "Coming." He turned to Marcus with a dismissive wave. "Feel free to look around. Someone will be with you if you have any questions." And then, he was gone, practically jogging toward the back office, leaving Marcus standing alone beside a $250,000 car. Marcus watched him go. He didn't react. Didn't show anger. Didn't show pain. He'd learned long ago that showing emotion only gave people power over you. Instead, he continued walking through the showroom, stopping here and there to examine a vehicle or read a specification card. The other employees remained near the reception desk. No one approached him. No one smiled. No one said welcome. 10 minutes passed. 15. Then the front door opened, and a well-dressed white couple walked in. The man wore a tailored suit. The woman wore designer everything. They looked like money, smelled like money, moved like money. The reaction was instantaneous. Two salespeople practically sprinted across the floor to greet them. Smiles appeared from nowhere. Hands were shaken with enthusiasm. The couple was guided toward the most expensive section of the showroom, as if they were royalty, visiting from a distant kingdom. Marcus stood near a display stand watching. The contrast was impossible to ignore. Same dealership, same employees, same products, but completely different treatment based on nothing more than appearance. He thought about his daughter Destiny, 16 years old, smart as a whip, already talking about college, about becoming a lawyer, about changing the world. What would happen when she walked into places like this? Would they see her potential? Or would they see what they wanted to see? Another black face to dismiss, to ignore, to push aside. The thought made his chest tight. He moved toward the back of the showroom, where a massive SUV sat beneath a banner proclaiming it the flagship model. It was exactly the kind of vehicle he'd been thinking about. Comfortable for long drives. Plenty of room for Destiny's college move. Something reliable for the years ahead. He circled it slowly, admiring the craftsmanship. That's when he heard the click of heels against the floor. Someone was approaching, and from the confident rhythm of those footsteps, Marcus knew this wasn't going to be another half-hearted dismissal. This was someone who was used to being in charge. He straightened and turned. The woman walking toward him was perhaps mid-40s with sharp features and an even sharper gaze. Her blazer was impeccably tailored. Her heels were polished to a mirror shine. A clipboard was tucked under her arm, and her expression, while technically professional, carried something cold underneath. Her name tag read, Victoria Sterling, Sales Manager. She stopped a few feet away, her eyes performing a quick assessment. Unlike the others, she didn't look away. She held his gaze, her smile tight, her posture rigid. "Good afternoon," she said. "Can I help you with something?" Marcus met her eyes. "Just looking around. You've got quite a collection here." Victoria's gaze flickered, taking in his worn boots, his simple shirt, his calloused hands. Something shifted behind her eyes. A calculation being made, a judgment being formed. "I see," she said slowly. "Well, welcome to Prestige Auto Gallery. We pride ourselves on offering only the finest vehicles to our distinguished clientele." She emphasized distinguished, in a way that made her meaning unmistakably clear. "I appreciate that," Marcus said. "I'm actually interested in this SUV, thinking about something comfortable for long drives. My daughter's going to college next year, so I'll need something reliable for the trips." Victoria's eyebrow arched slightly. "College? How nice." The words were polite. The tone was not. "Well, I should mention that this particular model starts at just under $300,000. We typically work with clients who have been pre-qualified through our financial services department." Pre-qualified. "It's standard practice. We find it saves everyone time and prevents any uncomfortable situations." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "What if I told you I'm ready to make a decision today?" Victoria's mask slipped for just a moment. Surprise flickered across her face, quickly replaced by something harder. "I appreciate the enthusiasm," she said carefully. "But these are significant purchases. Most of our clients take weeks, sometimes months, to finalize their decisions. We're not the kind of dealership where people walk in off the street and drive away the same day." "I understand," Marcus said. "But I'd still like to sit inside, get a feel for it, see if it's right for me." Victoria's expression tightened. She glanced around the showroom, then stepped slightly closer, lowering her voice. "Listen," she said, her tone dropping any pretense of warmth. "I've been doing this for almost 20 years. I can usually tell within the first minute whether someone is a serious buyer or just someone who wants to sit in expensive cars and take pictures for social media." Marcus looked at her steadily. "And which category do you think I fall into?" Victoria didn't answer directly. Instead, she reached into a folder tucked behind her clipboard and produced a single sheet of paper. She held it out to him. "I took the liberty of putting together some alternatives that might be more suitable for your situation. There's a dealership about 15 miles from here that specializes in pre-owned vehicles. Very reliable. Much more accessible price points." Marcus looked at the paper but didn't take it. He could see the list printed there. Used sedans, older SUVs, vehicles that cost a fraction of anything in this showroom. "That's very thoughtful," he said quietly. "But I think I'll keep looking here if that's all right." Victoria's jaw tightened. She lowered the paper, her patience visibly wearing thin. "Sir," she said, and the word carried an edge now, "I'm trying to be helpful. I'm trying to save you from an embarrassing situation. These vehicles aren't toys. They're serious investments for serious people. And what makes you think I'm not serious?" Before Victoria could respond, Marcus turned and walked back toward the silver sports car he'd admired earlier. He approached it slowly, then reached out and placed his hand on the door handle. "Excuse me." Victoria's voice cut through the air like a blade. She had followed him, her heels clicking rapidly against the floor. "I'm going to have to ask you not to touch the vehicles," she said firmly. "These are display models, fingerprint scratches. Any kind of damage would be extremely costly." Marcus looked at her, his hand still on the handle. "I just wanted to see the interior." "The interior is exactly what you'd expect from a vehicle in this class. Leather seats, advanced technology, premium materials. If you'd like more details, I can print out a specification sheet for you to take home." Marcus slowly removed his hand. He turned to face Victoria fully. "You mentioned you've been doing this for 20 years, he said quietly. "In all that time, have you ever been wrong about someone?" Victoria blinked. "Wrong? Have you ever looked at someone, made a judgment based on what they were wearing, and then discovered you'd completely misjudged them?" For a moment, something flickered in Victoria's eyes. Uncertainty, perhaps, or recognition of a truth she didn't want to acknowledge. But the moment passed quickly. "I trust my instincts," she said flatly. "They've served me well." "I see." At that moment, Derek walked past them, returning from the back office. He slowed as he approached, that annoying smirk spreading across his face again. He leaned toward Victoria, his voice carrying just enough for Marcus to hear. "Another window shopper," he said with a low chuckle. "We should start charging admission." Victoria's lips curved into a small smile. She didn't respond verbally, but the shared amusement between them was unmistakable. Derek continued on his way, disappearing toward another part of the showroom. Marcus stood perfectly still. He'd heard every word, seen every glance, felt every ounce of contempt that radiated from their exchange. But his expression remained calm, almost serene. Victoria turned back to him, her smile now carrying a hint of triumph. She clearly believed she'd won this quiet battle, that her assumptions had been validated. As I was saying, she continued, straightening her blazer, perhaps it would be best if you came back another time, when you're more prepared. Marcus looked at her for a long moment. The showroom hummed with quiet activity around them. Employees chatted at their desks. The wealthy couple from earlier was signing paperwork in a glass-walled office. Everything seemed perfectly normal. But beneath the surface, something was shifting. Marcus took a slow breath and spoke, his voice soft but steady. Actually, I'd like to speak with the owner. The words landed between them like a stone dropped into still water. Victoria's confident smile wavered. Confusion crept into her eyes. The owner, she repeated. That's correct. Victoria let out a short laugh, though it held no warmth. Sir, the owner of this dealership is an extremely busy person. They don't simply appear because a walk-in customer requests a meeting. That's not how things work here. I understand, Marcus replied, but I believe they'd want to know about my experience today. Victoria's expression hardened. Her patience was now completely exhausted. She straightened her blazer and lifted her chin. Look, she said, her voice rising. I've tried to be reasonable with you. I've offered alternatives. I've explained our policies. I've done everything in my power to help you understand that this dealership may not be the right fit for your needs. She took a step closer, her eyes narrowing. But you've refused to listen. You've wasted my time. And frankly, you're beginning to disturb other customers. Marcus glanced around the showroom. A few employees had stopped what they were doing, their attention drawn to the escalating confrontation. The wealthy couple had paused their paperwork, watching from the glass-walled office with curious expressions. Even the security guard near the entrance had straightened his hand, moving toward the radio on his belt. I apologize if I've caused any inconvenience, Marcus said quietly, but I still believe a conversation with the owner would be beneficial. Victoria's face flushed with frustration. She turned sharply toward the security guard. Frank, she called out, her voice carrying across the showroom. Could you come here, please? The security guard walked over with measured steps. He was broad-shouldered, mid-50s, with a stern face that suggested he'd seen this kind of situation before. Is there a problem here? Frank asked, his eyes scanning Marcus with professional detachment. Victoria nodded curtly. This gentleman has been asked to leave multiple times, but he refuses to cooperate. I need you to escort him out. Frank turned to Marcus. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to come with me. Marcus didn't move. He looked at Frank, then at Victoria, then at the employees who had gathered at a safe distance to watch. Before I go, he said calmly, may I make one phone call? Victoria scoffed. A phone call isn't going to change anything. It'll only take a moment, I promise. Frank hesitated, glancing at Victoria for guidance. She rolled her eyes. Fine. Make your call. But then you're leaving, whether you like it or not. Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He scrolled through his contacts, found the name he was looking for, and pressed call. He lifted the phone to his ear, his eyes never leaving Victoria's face. The showroom held its breath. Hey, it's me, Marcus said, his voice low. I'm at the dealership. There's been a small misunderstanding. Could you come down and help clear things up? He paused, listening. Great. See you in a few minutes. He ended the call and slipped the phone back into his pocket. Then he looked at Victoria with an expression she couldn't read. They'll be here shortly, he said simply. Victoria stared at him. Who did you just call? Marcus didn't answer. Instead, he walked calmly toward a leather bench near the entrance and sat down. He crossed one leg over the other, folded his hands in his lap and waited. The picture of patience. Frank looked at Victoria uncertainly. Should I still escort him out? Victoria hesitated. The unexpected phone call had thrown her off balance. This wasn't following her script. Wait, she said finally, her voice less certain than before. Let's see who shows up. The minutes that followed felt like hours. Victoria stood near the reception desk, her arms crossed her foot, tapping an anxious rhythm. Derek had emerged from wherever he'd been hiding, drawn by the commotion. He stood with the other employees, whispering and casting nervous glances toward Marcus. Marcus remained on the bench, calm and still. He watched the afternoon light shift across the showroom floor. He thought about the conversation that was coming, the words he would choose, the lessons that needed to be learned. He thought about his father. James Thompson Sr. had worked 2 jobs his entire life: janitor during the day, security guard at night. He'd never owned anything fancy, never drove a car that didn't have rust spots, never took a vacation that wasn't a day trip to the beach. But he'd raised Marcus with one unshakable belief: the way you treat people when you think no one's watching, that's who you really are. Marcus had carried those words with him through every job site, every business deal, every success and failure of the past 20 years. And now, sitting in the showroom of a dealership he owned, watching employees who didn't know his name, he understood why those words mattered more than ever. Then the front door opened. James Chen stepped into the showroom, navy suit immaculate, silver hair perfectly combed. His posture radiated authority, but it was his expression that commanded attention. Serious, focused, and directed entirely at one person. James walked across the showroom with purposeful strides. Employees stepped aside to let him pass, their eyes wide with recognition. Everyone knew James Chen, Regional Director of Operations, the man whose name was spoken with respect and fear throughout the company. James stopped in front of Marcus and extended his hand, a warm smile breaking across his face. "Mr. Thompson," he said, his voice carrying across the silent showroom. "It's wonderful to see you. I apologize for any inconvenience you may have experienced." Marcus stood and shook his hand firmly. "Thank you for coming, James. I appreciate it." The room had gone completely still. Every employee, every customer, every person in that showroom was watching with stunned disbelief. Victoria's face had drained of all color. Her clipboard slipped in her grip. James turned to face her, his warm expression cooling into something more professional. "Ms. Sterling," he said, his tone measured. "I see you've already had the pleasure of meeting Mr. Thompson." Victoria's mouth opened, closed, opened again. No words came out. James straightened his tie and spoke clearly, ensuring everyone could hear. "Allow me to clarify. This is Marcus Thompson. As of 3 weeks ago, he is the new owner of Prestige Auto Gallery." The words landed like thunder. Victoria's face went from pale to ashen. Her mouth moved, but she seemed to have lost the ability to form coherent sentences. Behind her, Derek had frozen mid-step. His earlier smirk had been replaced by an expression of pure horror. "The new owner," Victoria finally managed, her voice trembling. "He's the new owner." "That's correct," James confirmed. Marcus looked at Victoria, then at Derek, then at all the employees who stood scattered around the showroom like statues. He could see the fear in their eyes, the dawning realization, the desperate calculations running through their minds. "It was educational," Marcus said finally, his voice calm but weighted with meaning. Victoria took a shaky step forward. "Mr. Thompson, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. If I'd known who you were, I never would have—" She couldn't finish. Marcus looked at her for a long moment. "That's exactly the problem," he said quietly. You treated me a certain way because you didn't know who I was. The question is, how do you treat people when you think no one important is watching? Victoria had no answer. She stood there, her carefully constructed confidence shattered her eyes, glistening with tears that threatened to fall. Marcus turned to James. I think it's time we had a meeting with the entire staff. There are some things we need to discuss. James nodded immediately. Of course, I'll gather everyone in the conference room. He pulled out his phone and began making calls. Victoria remained rooted to her spot, her world collapsing around her. Derek had vanished entirely. And Marcus Thompson, the man they had dismissed, humiliated, and tried to throw out of his own dealership, stood in the center of the showroom. Not with anger, not with vengeance, but with something far more powerful. Purpose. The conference room fell silent as the last employee took their seat. Marcus stood near the windows, his back to the room, watching the afternoon sun begin its slow descent. He could feel the tension behind him, thick and heavy, pressing against the walls of this expensive space. 23 people sat around the mahogany table: sales associates, finance managers, administrative staff. The security guard, Frank, had positioned himself near the door, uncertain whether he was there as an employee or as protection. Victoria Sterling had chosen a seat in the far corner, as far from the head of the table as possible. She looked smaller now, diminished, her sharp blazer and polished heels suddenly meaningless. Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched her clipboard like a drowning person clutching driftwood. Derek was nowhere to be found. He had slipped out through a side exit moments after James Chen's announcement and hadn't been seen since. Marcus turned from the window and faced the room. No one spoke. No one moved. They barely seemed to breathe. Thank you all for being here. Marcus began, his voice soft but clear. I know this isn't the meeting any of you expected to have today. He paused, letting his eyes move across the faces before him. Some looked down. Others stared straight ahead, frozen. A few had tears already forming in their eyes. My name is Marcus Thompson. 3 weeks ago, I became the owner of this dealership. I didn't announce my visit today because I wanted to see something. I wanted to understand the culture of this place, the way people are treated when no one thinks it matters. A young salesman near the middle of the table shifted uncomfortably. His name tag read Tyler, and his face was flushed with emotion. What I experienced today, Marcus continued, was disappointing. But I want to be clear about something. I didn't call this meeting to humiliate anyone. I didn't come here looking for someone to punish. He began to walk slowly around the table, his work boots making soft sounds against the carpet. Let me tell you a story. The room seemed to lean in, hungry for understanding, desperate for context. When I was 9 years old, my father took me to a department store downtown. He wanted to buy me a new jacket for school. We didn't have much money. My father worked 2 jobs just to keep the lights on, but he'd saved up for weeks because he wanted me to have something nice. Marcus paused beside an empty chair but didn't sit. We walked into that store, and I remember feeling like we'd entered another world. Everything was clean and bright and beautiful. I'd never seen so many nice things in one place. His voice remained steady, but something deeper had crept into it. Something old and familiar. A salesman approached us. Tall white man in a fancy suit. He looked at my father's work clothes, looked at me and my hand-me-downs, and he said... Marcus paused. He said, the clearance section is in the back. Everything else is probably out of your price range. Victoria's head dropped lower. My father didn't argue, didn't make a scene. He just took my hand and walked me out of that store. We went to a different place, a smaller shop down the street, where a kind woman helped us find a jacket that fit. It cost more than my father wanted to spend, but he bought it anyway. Marcus stopped walking and stood at the head of the table. On the drive home, I asked my father why we left that first store. Why didn't we stand up for ourselves? Why did we let that man treat us that way? He looked around the room, meeting eyes that quickly looked away. My father said something I've never forgotten. He said, "Son, that man didn't see us. He saw what he wanted to see. And arguing with someone who's already made up their mind is like trying to fill a cup that's turned upside down. The water just runs off. Marcus placed both hands on the table and leaned forward slightly. But then he told me something else. He said, "One day you're going to be successful. One day you're going to walk into places like that and people are going to treat you different because of how you look. And when that day comes, you'll have a choice. You can become bitter, you can become angry, or you can become the kind of person who changes things." He straightened up. "I chose to become the kind of person who changes things. That's why I'm here today. Not for revenge, not for punishment, for change." Tyler, the young salesman, suddenly spoke up, his voice cracking. "Mr. Thompson, I saw what happened in the showroom. I saw how Miss Sterling and Derek treated you, and I didn't say anything." Marcus turned to look at him. "I just stood there." Tyler continued, his eyes wet. "I watched the whole thing, and I didn't do a single thing to stop it. I was afraid. Afraid of making waves. Afraid of getting on their bad side. Afraid of losing my job." He shook his head, shame written across his face. "I should have stepped in. I should have said something. Hey, let me help this customer. Something. Anything. But I just stood there like a coward." Marcus nodded slowly. "I appreciate your honesty, Tyler. It takes courage to admit when we've failed to act. The question now is what we do with that awareness." Another employee spoke up, a woman in her 30s with kind eyes and nervous hands. Her name tag read Sandra. "I've seen it happen before," she admitted quietly. "Customers who don't look wealthy enough being turned away or treated poorly. I always told myself it wasn't my place to interfere, that Victoria was the manager, that she knew what she was doing." She looked directly at Marcus, her voice trembling. "But that was just an excuse, wasn't it? I was making excuses so I didn't have to do the hard thing." "We all make excuses," Marcus said gently, "for the things we don't want to confront. But silence in the face of injustice is its own kind of choice." An older man at the far end of the table cleared his throat. His name was Robert, and he'd been with the dealership for 15 years. His hair was gray, his face lined with experience. "Mr. Thompson?" Robert said, his voice rough. "I've been in this business a long time, and I'm ashamed to say that what happened to you today, it's not new. It's been happening for years. Maybe not always so obvious, but it's there, in the little things. The way certain customers get greeted faster, the way some people get offered coffee while others don't, the assumptions we make before anyone even opens their mouth." He shook his head slowly. "I've watched it happen. I've been part of it even when I didn't realize it. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry that this is what we've become." Marcus listened to each confession, each admission of guilt, each acknowledgement of failure. He didn't interrupt, didn't judge, just listened. When the confessions finally subsided, he spoke again. "I want to share something else with you. When I started my construction company, I was 23 years old. I had $100 in my pocket, a used truck, and more determination than sense. A few people managed small smiles at that. I showed up to job sites in the same kind of clothes I'm wearing now, work boots, dirty jeans, hands rough from labor. And you know what happened? Half the time people assumed I was the laborer, not the owner, just another worker." He began walking again, moving around the table like a teacher among students. "I went to banks to apply for loans. They looked at me sitting in their fancy offices, and they saw a young black man who probably didn't understand how money worked. I got rejected more times than I can count, not because my business plan was bad, not because my numbers didn't add up, but because they couldn't see past what I looked like." His voice remained calm, but the weight of those memories was evident. "I tried to join a country club once. A potential client wanted to discuss a deal over golf. I showed up, filled out the paperwork, paid the fee, and somehow, mysteriously, my application got lost. 3 times. They couldn't find it. The check never got cashed. The paperwork just disappeared." He stopped walking and faced the group. "I could have gotten angry. I could have filed lawsuits, made noise, burned bridges, and maybe some of that would have been justified. But my father's words kept coming back to me. Become the kind of person who changes things. Marcus moved toward Victoria, who sat frozen in her corner, unable to meet his eyes. So I built my company. One project at a time, one satisfied customer at a time, one referral at a time. And when people doubted me, I let my work speak for itself. When doors closed in my face, I found windows. When they tried to make me feel small, I grew bigger. He stopped a few feet from Victoria. And you know what happened? Eventually, those same banks that rejected me started calling asking if I needed financing. Those same country clubs started sending invitations. Those same people who couldn't see me suddenly couldn't stop looking. Victoria finally lifted her head. Her eyes were red, her mascara smudged, her professional armor completely stripped away. Victoria. Marcus said, his voice neither harsh nor gentle. Just honest. I want to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly. She nodded, unable to speak. If I hadn't been the owner, if I had just been an ordinary person who looked exactly the way I look today, how would you have treated me? Victoria's lips trembled. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. The silence stretched on. Would you have given me the same respect you would give to someone in an expensive suit? Marcus continued. Would you have listened to what I had to say? Would you have treated me like a human being who deserved your time and attention? Victoria's tears finally spilled over, running down her cheeks in silent streams. She shook her head slowly. No, she whispered. I wouldn't have. Marcus nodded, his expression unchanged. And why not? Victoria struggled to answer. Her voice came out broken, fragmented. Because I made assumptions. Because I looked at you, and I saw what I expected to see. What I was trained to see. What 20 years in this business taught me to see. She took a shaky breath. I saw someone who couldn't afford our cars. Someone who was wasting my time. Someone who didn't belong here. And what do you see now? Marcus asked. Victoria looked at him. Really looked at him, perhaps for the first time. I see a man. A person. Someone with a story I never bothered to ask about. Someone I hurt because I was too arrogant to consider that I might be wrong. She covered her face with her hands. I see someone my father would be ashamed I treated this way. The room was utterly silent. Several employees had tears streaming down their faces. Even James Chen, standing by the door, seemed moved. Marcus let the moment breathe. He understood the weight of what was happening. This wasn't just about him. It was about something much bigger. Something that had been broken for a long time and needed to be rebuilt from the foundation up. Victoria, he said finally, I'm going to tell you something, and I want you to listen carefully. She lowered her hands and looked at him, her face ravaged by tears and regret. 20 years ago, a man changed my life. His name was Frank Morrison. He was a contractor, ran a small company in the valley. White guy, about 60 years old, had been in the business his whole life. Marcus sat down in a chair near Victoria, bringing himself to her level. I was desperate for work. I'd been turned away from every job site in the city. Nobody wanted to hire a young black kid with no experience and no connections. I was sleeping in my truck, eating one meal a day, trying to figure out how I was going to survive. The room was completely still. I showed up at Frank's job site one morning, just walked up to the foreman and asked if they needed help. The foreman laughed at me, told me to get lost, said they didn't need my kind around. Marcus's voice remained steady, but something deeper had emerged in it. I was about to leave when Frank came over. He'd been watching from across the site. He walked up to me, looked me in the eye, and asked one question. Can you work hard? I said yes. He said, "Then show me." Marcus leaned back slightly. He gave me a chance, one day, one opportunity to prove myself, and I worked harder that day than I'd ever worked in my life. I was the first one there in the morning and the last one to leave at night. I did every task they gave me without complaining. I learned everything I could. At the end of the day, Frank came up to me and said, "Same time tomorrow." Marcus smiled slightly at the memory. He kept me on for 3 months. Then he promoted me to assistant foreman. Then he started teaching me the business side of things, how to bid on contracts, how to manage crews, how to deal with clients. He taught me everything I know. When I asked him why he gave me a chance when nobody else, would you know what he said? The room waited. He said, "Because someone gave me a chance once, and I figured it was my turn to pass it on." Marcus looked at Victoria. Frank Morrison died 8 years ago. Heart attack on a job site. He was 72 years old and still swinging a hammer. I spoke at his funeral. Told everyone there what he'd done for me, what he meant to me. His voice softened. And I made a promise that day. I promised that I would do for others what Frank did for me. That I would give chances to people who deserved them. That I would see people for who they could become, not just for who they appeared to be. Victoria was weeping openly now, her shoulders shaking. "I'm not saying what you did was acceptable," Marcus continued. "It wasn't. It was hurtful and wrong, and the kind of behavior that damages people in ways you might never see." He paused. "But I've also learned that people are more than their worst moments. That change is possible if someone is willing to do the work. The question is whether you're willing." Victoria struggled to compose herself. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing her makeup further. "I don't deserve a second chance," she said, her voice hoarse. "After what I did, after how I treated you, I don't deserve anything from you except to be fired." "Maybe not," Marcus agreed. "But deserving isn't always the point. Sometimes grace is given precisely because it isn't deserved. That's what makes it grace." He stood up and addressed the entire room. "I'm going to make some changes at this dealership. Starting tomorrow, we're implementing new policies, new training programs, new standards for how every customer is treated regardless of how they look, how they dress, or what car they drive." He looked around at the faces before him. "But policies aren't enough. Rules don't change hearts. What I need from each of you is a commitment to see people differently, to challenge your assumptions, to treat every person who walks through those doors like they might be the most important customer you've ever had." Tyler raised his hand tentatively. "Mr. Thompson, how do we do that? How do we change something that's been ingrained in us for so long?" Marcus considered the question carefully. "You start by paying attention. Every time you make an assumption about someone, stop and ask yourself why. Where did that assumption come from? Is it based on anything real? Or is it based on fear or prejudice or laziness?" He walked toward Tyler. "You start by listening. Really listening. Not just waiting for your turn to speak, but actually hearing what people are saying, what they need, what they hope for. And you start by remembering that every person you meet has a story. They have struggles you know nothing about, victories you've never heard of, dreams that are just as important to them as yours are to you." Marcus returned to the head of the table. The young man in torn jeans might be a tech entrepreneur who just sold his company. The elderly woman in modest clothing might be a retired professor who spent her life changing minds. The teenager in a hoodie might be the next great inventor. He paused. "But here's the thing. Even if none of that were true, even if the person walking through that door truly had nothing, they would still deserve to be treated with dignity. They would still deserve respect. Because that's not something people have to earn. It's something they're owed simply by being human." The words hung in the air, settling over the room like a blanket. Robert, the veteran salesman, spoke up again. "Mr. Thompson, what about Victoria? What happens to her?" All eyes turned to Victoria, who sat motionless in her corner, her face streaked with tears. Marcus looked at her for a long moment. That's a conversation Victoria and I need to have privately. But I want everyone to understand something first. He addressed the entire room. Derek is no longer employed at Prestige Auto Gallery. He left the building this afternoon and will not be returning. A murmur rippled through the group. His behavior today was not an isolated incident. After speaking with several of you, I've learned that this was part of a pattern. Customers mocked behind their backs. Colleagues undermined. A culture of contempt that he helped create and maintain. Marcus's voice hardened slightly. Everyone deserves a second chance, but that chance has to be given to those who recognize their mistakes and want to change. Derek showed no remorse today. When things got difficult, he hid. When I offered to speak with him, he had already left the building. He looked back at Victoria. The difference between Victoria and Derek is that Victoria stayed. She faced the consequences of her actions. She's sitting here right now, as uncomfortable as that must be, instead of running away. Victoria met his eyes, gratitude and shame mingling in her expression. That tells me something, Marcus said. It tells me there might be something worth believing in. He clapped his hands together once, signaling a shift. All right, I want everyone to go home tonight. Think about what we've discussed. Ask yourselves what kind of person you want to be, what kind of legacy you want to leave. He moved toward the door. When you come back tomorrow, come back ready to be better than you were today. That's all I ask. The employees began to rise slowly. Their movements subdued, their expressions thoughtful. They filed out of the room in silence, each one carrying the weight of Marcus's words. A few glanced back at Victoria, who remained seated in her corner. Tyler stopped at the door and turned around. Mr. Thompson. Marcus looked at him. Thank you, Tyler said. For what you said, for how you handled this. I know you didn't have to be this understanding. Marcus nodded. Go home, Tyler. Get some rest. Tomorrow's a new day. Tyler left, closing the door softly behind him. Only 3 people remained in the room now. Marcus, Victoria, and James Chen, who stood silently by the window. The sun had shifted, casting long golden rays across the conference table. The shadows had grown longer, deeper, reaching toward the corners of the room like fingers. Marcus pulled out a chair and sat down across from Victoria. Now, he said quietly, let's talk about your future. Victoria sat frozen in her chair, her hands clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles had turned white. The conference room felt smaller now, the walls pressing in the air thick with the weight of what was coming. Marcus watched her for a moment, his expression unreadable. James Chen remained near the window, a silent witness to whatever would unfold. I'm going to give you a choice, Marcus said finally. And I want you to think carefully before you answer. Victoria nodded, not trusting her voice. Option 1. You resign from your position today. You'll receive a fair severance package, 3 months' salary, full benefits through the end of the year. I'll provide a neutral reference that won't mention what happened here. You can start fresh somewhere else. Put this behind you. Move on with your life. Victoria's breath caught. She hadn't expected this. She'd expected anger, punishment, termination without ceremony. Option 2. Marcus continued, his voice steady. You stay, but not as sales manager. You'd be demoted to a regular sales associate position for a period of 6 months. During that time, you'd work under a new manager. You'd complete a comprehensive training program on customer service and unconscious bias. You'd be held to the same standards as every other employee on this floor. He leaned back slightly. At the end of those 6 months, if you've demonstrated genuine change, if you've shown that you understand what went wrong and have committed to doing better, we'll reassess your position. There are no guarantees, but there's the possibility of rebuilding what you've lost. The room fell silent. Victoria stared at him, her mind racing. 2 paths stretched before her, each one leading somewhere she couldn't quite see. One offered escape, the other offered redemption. Neither would be easy. Why? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Why would you give me another chance after everything I said, everything I did, the way I treated you? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Because someone gave me a chance once, he said simply. When I had nothing, when no one believed in me, someone saw something worth saving. He stood up and walked to the window standing beside James. I told you about Frank Morrison, the man who hired me when nobody else would, but I didn't tell you everything. Victoria looked up, waiting. Frank had a son. His name was Michael, about my age, maybe a year or two older. Michael didn't like me. From the first day I showed up on that job site, he made it clear that he thought his father was making a mistake. Marcus's voice grew distant, lost in memory. He called me names when his father wasn't around, gave me the worst assignments, made sure I knew that I didn't belong, that I would never belong. What happened? Victoria asked. One day we were working on a roofing job, 3 stories up. Michael was carrying a bundle of shingles, showing off, trying to prove he was tougher than everyone else. He lost his footing near the edge. Marcus turned from the window. I was closest. I saw him start to fall, and I had a choice. I could let him go, let gravity do what it was going to do, or I could reach out. Victoria held her breath. I grabbed his arm, pulled him back. We both went down hard on that roof, but we were alive. Michael had a broken wrist. I had bruised ribs, but we were alive. He walked back toward Victoria, his footsteps slow and deliberate. After that, Michael changed. Not overnight, not completely, but something shifted in him. He started treating me differently, started seeing me as a person instead of a problem. By the time I left to start my own company, we were friends. Marcus sat down again, closer to Victoria this time. Michael called me last year, told me his father's death had hit him harder than he expected. Told me he'd been thinking about all the years he wasted hating people for no reason, all the relationships he'd damaged, all the opportunities he'd missed. What did you tell him? I told him it was never too late to change, that the past couldn't be undone, but the future was still unwritten, that every day was a chance to be better than the day before. Marcus looked directly into Victoria's eyes. I believe that. I have to believe it. Because if people can't change, if we're all just prisoners of our worst moments, then nothing I've built means anything. Victoria's tears had started again, silent streams running down her face. I'm not Michael, she said. I'm worse. I wasn't just unkind to you. I was cruel. I laughed at you. I tried to have you thrown out of your own building. I know. How can you even look at me right now? Marcus considered the question carefully. Because I see something in you that you might not see in yourself. I see someone who stayed. Someone who faced the consequences when it would have been easier to run. Someone who's sitting here right now, asking the hard questions instead of making excuses. He gestured toward the door. Derek ran. The moment things got difficult, he disappeared. He's probably already crafting a story in his head where he's the victim, where none of this was his fault, where he was just following orders or doing what everyone else was doing. Victoria flinched at the comparison. But you're here. You're hurting. You're ashamed. And that shame, as painful as it is, tells me something important. It tells me you know the difference between right and wrong. You just lost your way for a while. Victoria wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. 20 years, she said, her voice hollow. I've been in this business for 20 years. And somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing customers as people. They became numbers, quotas, commission checks. She shook her head slowly. I remember when I started. I was so excited, so eager to help people find their perfect car. I used to stay late researching models, learning everything I could so I could give good advice. What changed? Marcus asked. Victoria was silent for a long moment. Success, she finally said. I got good at sales, really good. I hit my targets, then exceeded them. I got promoted, got raises, got recognition. She laughed bitterly. And somewhere in all that success, I started believing I was better than the people I was supposed to be serving. I started thinking that my time was more valuable than theirs, that I could tell at a glance who deserved my attention and who didn't. She looked at Marcus, her expression raw. I became the thing I used to hate, the snobby salesperson who judges you before you open your mouth, the gatekeeper who decides who belongs and who doesn't. When did you realize that? Marcus asked. About 2 hours ago, when you asked me if I'd ever been wrong about someone. That question has been echoing in my head ever since. She straightened slightly, a flicker of something like resolve crossing her face. I've been wrong about a lot of people. Not just you. Hundreds of customers over the years who walked in looking like they couldn't afford our cars. I dismissed them, ignored them, passed them off to junior salespeople. Her voice cracked. And I'll never know how many of them were like you. How many of them had stories I never bothered to hear, dreams I never bothered to acknowledge, money I never bothered to assume they had. Marcus nodded slowly. That's a heavy realization. It's crushing, Victoria admitted. I feel like I've wasted 20 years of my life building something ugly, something wrong. You haven't wasted it, Marcus said. You've learned from it. There's a difference. Victoria looked at him with something like wonder. How are you so calm about all this? I humiliated you in front of everyone. I called security on you. I handed you a list of used car dealerships like you were some kind of charity case. Marcus smiled slightly. You want the truth? Please. It hurt. Every word you said, every look you gave me, every assumption you made. It hurt. I'm human. I have feelings. And spending 42 years being judged by the color of my skin and the clothes on my back doesn't make it easier. If anything, it makes it worse. His smile faded. But I've learned that my reaction to pain is a choice. I can let it make me bitter. Let it turn me into someone who sees enemies everywhere, who expects the worst from people who gives up on humanity. He shook his head. Or I can let it make me better. Let it remind me why kindness matters, why dignity matters, why treating people with respect is never wasted, even when they don't deserve it. Victoria absorbed his words in silence. I want option 2, she said finally. I want to stay. James Chen stirred near the window. Victoria, are you sure the severance package is generous? You could walk away clean, start over somewhere else. Victoria shook her head. I don't want to walk away clean. I want to earn my way back. I want to prove to myself and to everyone else that I can be better than what I showed today. She looked at Marcus. I know it won't be easy. I know people will talk. The other employees will know what happened. They'll see me go from sales manager to sales associate. They'll whisper. They'll judge. They will, Marcus agreed. Are you prepared for that? I have to be. Because the alternative is running away. And I've run away from hard things my whole life. I've avoided confrontation. I've blamed others for my mistakes. I've told myself stories that made me the hero when I was really the villain. She sat up straighter. Not anymore. If I'm going to change, it has to be real. It has to be visible. It has to cost me something. Marcus studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. All right. We start tomorrow. You'll report to the new sales manager whoever I appoint. You'll complete every training module I assign. You'll treat every customer who walks through that door like they're the most important person in the building. I understand. And Victoria, yes. If you slip up, if you fall back into old patterns, if I hear even a whisper that you've treated someone the way you treated me today, you're done. No second warning. No third chance. You're out. Victoria swallowed hard. I understand. Marcus stood and extended his hand. Victoria rose and shook it, her grip firm despite her trembling. Thank you, she said, her voice thick with emotion, for believing I can be better, even when I gave you no reason to. Prove me right, Marcus said simply. That's all the thanks I need. James moved toward the door. I'll start the paperwork tonight. We'll need to restructure the management hierarchy, post the sales manager position, adjust the training schedule. Marcus nodded. I want to be involved in selecting the new manager. Someone who understands what we're trying to build here. Of course. Victoria hesitated near the door. Mr. Thompson, can I ask you something? Go ahead. Your daughter, the one you mentioned, the one going to college next year. Marcus's expression softened at the mention of destiny. What about her? Do you think she's ever been treated the way you were treated today? The question hit Marcus harder than he expected. He was quiet for a moment, memories surfacing that he usually kept buried. Yes, he said finally. More times than I want to count. Victoria's face crumpled. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Don't apologize to me. Change for her. Change for all the young people who walk into places like this and get judged before they say a single word. That's how you make this right. Victoria nodded, wiping her eyes one last time. I will. I promise. She left the conference room, her footsteps echoing down the hallway. Marcus and James stood alone in the silence that followed. That was unexpected, James said quietly. I thought for sure you were going to fire her. Marcus walked to the window and looked out at the fading light. I almost did. When she handed me that list of used car dealerships, when she laughed with Derek when she called security. There was a moment when all I wanted was to watch her face when she realized what she'd done. He turned to face James. But revenge is easy. It feels good for about 5 minutes, and then it leaves you empty. Building something, changing something, helping someone become better than they were. That's hard. That takes work, but it lasts. James moved to stand beside him. You really think she can change? Marcus considered the question. I think people surprise you. I think the ones you write off sometimes become your greatest assets, and the ones you count on sometimes let you down. Victoria made a terrible mistake today, but she also showed me something in that conference room, something real. What's that? Shame, genuine shame. Not the kind where you're sorry you got caught, the kind where you're sorry for who you've become. Marcus picked up his jacket from the chair where he'd left it. That kind of shame is rare. Most people protect themselves from it. They build walls of excuses and justifications. They convince themselves they were right, or at least not that wrong. But Victoria sat there and saw herself clearly. Maybe for the first time in years. He headed toward the door. That's the first step toward real change, seeing yourself clearly, accepting what you see, and deciding to do something about it. James followed him out of the conference room. What about Derek? Should we try to reach out to him? Marcus shook his head. Derek made his choice when he ran. When things got hard, he disappeared. That tells me everything I need to know about his character. Some people would say that's not fair, that everyone deserves a chance to explain themselves. Marcus stopped walking and turned to face James. You're right, and if Derek comes back, if he shows up tomorrow and asks for a conversation, I'll give him one. But he has to take that step. He has to face what he did. I'm not going to chase him down and beg him to be accountable. They walked through the empty showroom. The vehicles gleamed under the security lights, silent witnesses to the day's events. What about you? James asked. How are you feeling about all of this? Marcus was quiet for a moment. Tired, he admitted. Hopeful, sad, determined. He ran his hand along the hood of the silver sports car, the same one Victoria had forbidden him to touch hours earlier. When I bought this dealership, I told myself it was just an investment, another asset in the portfolio. But today showed me it's more than that. It's a test of whether I really believe what I say I believe. And what's that? That people matter more than profit, that dignity isn't negotiable, that the way you treat someone when you think they have nothing to offer says everything about who you really are. Marcus headed toward the front entrance. I used to think success meant having enough money that people couldn't treat me badly anymore. That if I got rich enough, powerful enough, respected enough, the judgments would stop. He pushed open the glass door and stepped into the cool night air. But it doesn't work that way. People still see what they want to see. The only thing that changes is how you respond to it. James joined him outside. What happens now? Marcus looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Now we build something different, something better. We hire people who see customers as people, not walking wallets. We train them to listen, to respect, to serve. We create a culture where what happened today could never happen again. He turned to James, a small smile crossing his face. And we see what Victoria does with her second chance, whether she rises to meet it or crumbles under the weight of it. You're betting a lot on her. I'm betting everything on her, on all of them. That's what leadership is, James. Betting on people. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, but you have to keep betting or there's no point in playing the game. Marcus walked toward his truck, his work boots crunching against the gravel. Go home, he called back to James. Get some rest. Tomorrow we start rebuilding. James nodded and headed toward his own car. Marcus climbed into his truck and sat there for a moment, hands on the wheel, staring at the dealership he now owned. He thought about his father, about Frank Morrison, about Michael, about all the people who had shaped him for better or worse. He thought about Destiny, probably at home right now doing her homework, dreaming about college and the future. He thought about Victoria, probably driving home in a daze, wrestling with everything that had happened. And he thought about tomorrow, the work that needed to be done, the changes that needed to be made, the people who needed to be reached. It wasn't going to be easy. Change never was. But it was possible. Marcus started the engine and pulled out of the parking lot, leaving Prestige Auto Gallery behind him. Not running away from what had happened. Running toward what could be. 6 weeks had passed since that afternoon. Victoria arrived at the dealership every morning at 7, a full hour before anyone else. She unlocked the doors, turned on the lights, and walked through the showroom in silence, remembering. This was where she had stood when Marcus walked in. This was where she had handed him that list. This was where she had called security. This was where her world had collapsed and somehow impossibly been rebuilt. The name tag on her blazer no longer read Sales Manager. It simply read Victoria Sterling Sales Associate. The title change had been noticed by everyone, whispered about in break rooms, discussed over lunches, speculated about in parking lots. Some people pitied her. Others thought she got what she deserved. A few, the ones who had known her longest, seemed almost relieved, as if they had been waiting for someone to finally hold her accountable. Victoria didn't blame them. She had been difficult to work with, demanding, critical, quick to judge, and slow to forgive. The same qualities that had made her successful had also made her feared. Now she was neither. The new sales manager, a woman named Rachel Chen, had been brought in from another dealership. She was younger than Victoria by 10 years, calm where Victoria was intense, patient where Victoria was demanding. She treated everyone equally, from the senior salespeople to the janitors who cleaned the bathrooms at night. Victoria's first week under Rachel's supervision had been humbling. She was assigned the same tasks as the newest employees: phone duty, walk-in greetings, follow-up calls with customers who had visited but not purchased. Work she hadn't done in 15 years. She did it without complaint. On her third day, a young couple came in looking for their first car together. They were nervous, clearly on a tight budget, holding hands as they walked through the showroom like they were afraid of breaking something. The old Victoria would have passed them off to someone junior, would have made a quick assessment, and moved on to more promising prospects. The new Victoria approached them with a genuine smile. "Welcome to Prestige Auto Gallery. I'm Victoria. How can I help you today?" The young woman looked surprised by the warmth in her voice. "We're just looking. We probably can't afford anything here, but my boyfriend wanted to see the cars." "Then let's see them together," Victoria said. "Tell me what you're looking for. What matters most to you?" They spent an hour walking through the showroom. Victoria asked questions, listened to answers, learned that they were getting married in 3 months, that they were saving for a house, that they needed something reliable but didn't want to feel like they were driving their parents' car. She didn't try to sell them anything. She didn't push toward expensive models or unnecessary add-ons. She just helped them understand their options. At the end of the visit, they thanked her profusely. The young woman hugged her, which startled Victoria more than she wanted to admit. "You're the first person at a car dealership who's ever actually listened to us," the woman said. "Usually they take one look at us and walk the other way." Victoria felt something shift inside her, something old and hard beginning to crack. "I'm sorry that's been your experience," she said quietly. "It shouldn't be. They didn't buy a car that day. They probably never would buy from Prestige Auto Gallery. But they left feeling respected, valued, seen." And Victoria discovered that mattered more than she had ever imagined. The weeks that followed were a journey of small moments and gradual revelations. Victoria began to notice things she had been blind to before. The way certain customers tensed up when they walked through the door bracing for judgment. The relief on their faces when they were greeted kindly. The difference between selling to someone and serving them. She completed every training module Marcus had assigned. Sessions on unconscious bias. Workshops on active listening. Role-playing exercises designed to build empathy. Material she would have dismissed as nonsense 6 months ago. Now she absorbed it like water soaking into dry earth. One afternoon, Rachel called her into the office. Victoria's heart sank. She had been working so hard, trying so desperately to prove herself. Had she done something wrong? Had someone complained? "Close the door," Rachel said. "Have a seat." Victoria sat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The same position she had held in the conference room with Marcus. The same fear. The same uncertainty. Rachel studied her for a moment. "How are you doing?" "Victoria, really?" The question caught her off guard. "I'm fine. Working hard, trying to learn." "That's not what I asked. I asked how you're doing, as a person, not as an employee." Victoria was silent. No one had asked her that question in years, maybe decades. "I'm struggling," she admitted finally. "Every day I come in here, and I remember what I did, what I said. The look on his face when I handed him that list. It haunts me." Rachel nodded slowly. "That's normal. That's actually healthy. It means you're processing what happened instead of burying it." "Sometimes I wonder if I should have taken the severance, just walked away and started fresh somewhere else." "Why didn't you?" Victoria considered the question. "Because running away is what I've always done. When things get hard, when I make mistakes, when people see the real me, I run. I reinvent myself. I pretend the past didn't happen." She met Rachel's eyes. Mr. Thompson saw through that. He gave me a choice, and both options were really the same question. Are you going to keep running, or are you going to finally face yourself? Rachel leaned back in her chair. "I've been watching you these past few weeks. You know that, right? That's part of my job." Victoria nodded. "You're different from what I expected. When Marcus told me your story, when he explained what happened, I had a picture in my mind. A certain type of person. Hard, cold, unreachable. That's who I was. Maybe. But that's not who I see now. I see someone who's trying, someone who's genuinely changing, not just performing change." Victoria felt tears threatening. She blinked them back. "I don't know if I'm changing. I just know I can't go back to who I was. That person destroyed everything she touched." Rachel stood and walked around the desk. She sat in the chair next to Victoria, bringing them to the same level. "Can I tell you something? Something I don't usually share." Victoria nodded. "Before I got into car sales, I was a prosecutor. Spent 8 years putting people in prison. I was good at it. Really good. I had the highest conviction rate in my district." Victoria looked at her with surprise. "One day, I put a man away for robbery. Open and shut case. Eyewitness testimony, physical evidence. He got 15 years. Rachel's voice grew quiet. 3 years later, DNA evidence exonerated him. He hadn't done it. The eyewitness was mistaken. The physical evidence had been mishandled, and I had sent an innocent man to prison. What happened? I couldn't live with it. I tried therapy. I tried medication. I tried drinking. Nothing worked. The guilt was eating me alive. Rachel stood and walked to the window. I quit my job, walked away from everything I had built. My colleagues thought I was having a breakdown. Maybe I was, but I knew I couldn't spend another day in a system that had allowed me to destroy someone's life. She turned back to Victoria. I drifted for a while, tried different jobs. Nothing stuck. Then I ended up in car sales of all things, and I discovered something unexpected. What? That every interaction is a chance to make something right. Every customer who walks through the door is an opportunity to treat someone with dignity, to give them an experience that restores a little of their faith in humanity. Rachel sat down again. I can't undo what I did to that man. I visited him after he was released, apologized. He forgave me, which somehow made it worse. But I can spend the rest of my life trying to balance the scales, one kind interaction at a time. Victoria was crying now, tears streaming freely down her face. Is that why you took this job when Marcus called? Rachel nodded. He told me about you, about what happened, and I saw myself in your story. Someone who had done something terrible, someone who was being given a chance to make it right. She reached out and took Victoria's hand. I said yes because I believe in redemption. I believe people can change. Not because they deserve it, but because the alternative is a world where everyone is defined by their worst moment. And that's not a world I want to live in. Victoria squeezed her hand, unable to speak. You're doing good work, Victoria. Real work, not performance, not pretense. Change. Some days I don't feel like I'm changing. Some days I feel like the same terrible person wearing a different mask. That's the doubt talking, the shame. They're necessary, but they're not the whole truth. Rachel released her hand and stood up. Marcus asked me to give him monthly reports on your progress. Do you want to know what I told him this morning? Victoria braced herself. I told him you're exceeding expectations, that you're approaching every customer with genuine care, that you're mentoring the junior staff instead of competing with them, that you're becoming the kind of salesperson this industry desperately needs. Victoria stared at her. You said all that. I said more than that. I said if you keep going at this rate, I'm going to recommend reinstating your management position at the 6-month mark. The words hit Victoria like a physical blow. She hadn't allowed herself to hope for that, hadn't dared to imagine that she could earn back what she had lost. I don't know what to say. Don't say anything. Just keep doing what you're doing. Keep showing up. Keep trying. Keep letting the old Victoria die so the new one can live. Victoria stood wiping her eyes. Thank you, Rachel, for believing in me, for sharing your story, for everything. Rachel smiled. Thank Marcus. He's the one who bet on you. I'm just here to make sure you don't waste it. Victoria left the office feeling lighter than she had in weeks. The weight was still there, the shame still present, but something had shifted. She wasn't carrying it alone anymore. That evening, she stayed late to help with a delivery. A customer had purchased a car and wanted to pick it up after work. Normal protocol was for junior staff to handle deliveries, but Victoria volunteered. The customer was a woman in her 60s, gray-haired and soft-spoken. She had bought a modest sedan, nothing flashy, nothing expensive. She arrived at the dealership looking tired, her work uniform still visible beneath her coat. Mrs. Patterson. Victoria approached her with a warm smile. I'm Victoria. I'll be helping you with your delivery today. The woman looked surprised. Oh, I didn't expect anyone to be here so late. I could have come another time. Nonsense. This is your day, the day you drive home in your new car. It should be special. Victoria walked her through the paperwork, explaining each document, carefully answering every question. She showed her the features of the vehicle, adjusted the mirrors, programmed the radio to her favorite stations. "You're very thorough," Mrs. Patterson said. "Most people rush through this part. This is important. You're trusting us with a big purchase. The least we can do is make sure you feel confident and comfortable." When the paperwork was complete, Victoria walked Mrs. Patterson to her new car. She opened the door for her, handed her the keys. "Before you go, can I ask you something?" Mrs. Patterson nodded. "Why did you choose us?" "There are a lot of dealerships closer to where you live, Mrs. Patterson was quiet for a moment. "My husband bought our first car here, 40 years ago. He passed away last spring, and I finally had to accept that I couldn't keep driving his old truck." Her eyes glistened. "I wanted to buy from the same place he did. For the memories, I suppose." "Silly, isn't it?" Victoria's throat tightened. "It's not silly at all. It's beautiful." Mrs. Patterson looked at her. "The young man who helped me when I first came in, Tyler, he was very kind. He didn't rush me. Didn't try to sell me something I didn't need. Just listened. Tyler's one of our best. He mentioned you, actually. Said you'd been through some changes lately. Said you were different now." Victoria felt the words like a gift she didn't deserve. "I'm trying to be," she said quietly. Mrs. Patterson reached out and patted her hand. "Whatever happened, it seems like it worked. You have kind eyes. That's not something you can fake." She got into her car, started the engine, and rolled down the window. "Thank you, Victoria, for making this easier than I expected." "Thank you, Mrs. Patterson, for sharing your story with me." Victoria watched her drive away, taillights disappearing into the evening darkness. She stood there for a long time, thinking about husbands who had passed away, about 40 years of memories tied to a place, about the responsibility that came with being part of someone's story. The old Victoria had never thought about any of that. Customers were transactions, sales were numbers. Success was measured in commissions and quotas. The new Victoria was beginning to understand that it was so much more. Marcus came by the dealership the following week. He didn't announce his visits anymore, just showed up unannounced to see how things were running. Victoria spotted him near the entrance talking with Tyler, both of them laughing about something. She hesitated, unsure whether to approach. They had spoken only briefly since that day in the conference room. A few words here and there. Polite exchanges. Nothing substantial. Marcus caught her eye and walked over. "Victoria, how are you?" "Good, sir. Working hard." "I've heard. Rachel sends me updates. She's impressed with your progress." "She's been very supportive, more than I deserve." Marcus studied her for a moment. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Are you happy?" The question startled her. "Happy?" "Yes, not just surviving, not just going through the motions. Happy." Victoria considered the question carefully. "I'm not sure I know what that means anymore, but I think I'm closer to it than I've been in a long time." Marcus nodded. "That's honest. I appreciate honesty." He started to walk away, then stopped. "My daughter came by the dealership yesterday. Destiny. She wanted to see where I work. I saw her. Beautiful girl. She has your eyes." Marcus smiled. "She asked me about you, about what happened." Victoria's heart sank. "What did you tell her?" "The truth, that you made a mistake, that you faced the consequences, that you're working every day to become better." He turned to face her fully. "She asked me why I gave you a second chance. You want to know what I told her?" Victoria nodded, afraid to speak. "I told her that everyone deserves the chance to prove they're more than their worst moment. That forgiveness isn't about letting people off the hook. It's about giving them the opportunity to earn back what they lost." His voice softened. "She said that sounded like something her grandfather would say." And she was right. It was. Victoria felt tears threatening again. She had cried more in the past 6 weeks than in the past 6 years. Your father sounds like he was a wise man. He was. He died when I was 19. Heart attack. No warning. Just gone. I'm sorry. Don't be. He lived long enough to teach me what mattered. That's more than a lot of people get. Marcus looked around the showroom at the employees going about their work, at the customers being served at the business he now owned. This place is changing, Victoria. I can feel it. The energy is different. People are different. You changed it. By what you did. By giving people like me a chance. Marcus shook his head. I opened a door. You're the ones walking through it. He checked his watch. I need to go. Meeting with potential investors. But I wanted you to know something. What? Rachel's going to recommend you for the assistant manager position next month. It's not the job you had before, but it's a step back toward leadership. Victoria's breath caught. I don't know if I'm ready for that. You're not. That's why it's a good thing. You'll grow into it. You'll make mistakes. You'll learn. That's how it works. He extended his hand. Victoria shook it, feeling the calluses on his palm, the strength in his grip. Thank you, Mr. Thompson, for everything. Stop thanking me. Start proving me right. He walked away, leaving Victoria standing in the middle of the showroom she had once ruled with an iron fist. She looked around at the gleaming cars, the polished floors, the customers browsing, and the staff serving them. It was the same place it had always been. But she was different, and sometimes that was enough to change everything. 3 months later, on a Saturday afternoon in late summer, Victoria stood near the entrance of Prestige Auto Gallery, wearing her new name tag, Assistant Sales Manager. The promotion had come quietly, without ceremony. Rachel had called her into the office, handed her the new badge, and said simply, "You earned this. Don't make me regret it." Victoria had promised she wouldn't. The dealership hummed with weekend energy. Families browsed the showroom. Couples debated options. Salespeople moved between customers with purpose and patience. The culture had shifted in ways both visible and invisible. Tyler had become one of their top performers, not through aggressive tactics, but through genuine connection. He spent time with every customer, learning their stories, understanding their needs. His sales numbers reflected something deeper than technique. They reflected care. Robert, the veteran salesman, who had confessed his complicity in that first meeting, had become an unexpected mentor to younger staff. He shared stories of mistakes he had made over 30 years and the business lessons learned through failure and growth. His honesty created space for others to be honest too. Even Frank, the security guard who had been asked to escort Marcus out that day, had changed. He greeted every customer, now opened doors, offered directions. He had told Victoria once that he couldn't stop thinking about what would have happened if he had actually removed Marcus from the building. I would have thrown out the owner, he said, shaking his head. The actual owner, and I wouldn't have thought twice about it. Neither would I, Victoria had replied. That's why we have to think twice now, about everything. The afternoon sun slanted through the glass walls, casting long shadows across the polished floor. Victoria was reviewing some paperwork when she heard the front door open. A young black man walked in. He was maybe 17, 18 at most. He wore a faded hoodie, jeans with holes in the knees, and sneakers that had seen better days. His hair was uncombed. His eyes were cautious, scanning the showroom like he expected to be challenged. Victoria watched as he moved hesitantly toward the vehicles, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. He stopped beside a sports car, looking at it with the kind of longing that had nothing to do with price tags or payment plans. 3 months ago, Victoria would have dismissed him in a heartbeat, would have sent a junior salesperson to deal with him, or worse, ignored him entirely until he left on his own. But that was 3 months ago. She walked toward him, her heels clicking softly against the floor. Welcome to Prestige Auto Gallery. I'm Victoria. How can I help you today? The young man looked up, surprise flickering across his face. He had expected to be ignored, expected to be watched with suspicion, expected the treatment he had probably received at every other dealership he had ever visited. I'm just looking, he said, his voice guarded. I know I probably can't afford anything here. I just wanted to see them up close. Victoria smiled. Then let me show you around. There's no pressure to buy anything. Sometimes it's nice just to dream a little. His eyes widened. For real. For real. What's your name? Jalen. Jalen Williams. Nice to meet you, Jalen. What kind of cars do you like? He hesitated, then gestured toward the sports car he had been admiring. Something like that. Fast, clean. Something that makes people look twice when you drive by. Victoria nodded. I understand. Come on, let me show you what we have. She spent the next 45 minutes walking Jalen through the showroom. She explained engines and transmissions, performance specs and safety features. She answered his questions, even the ones that revealed how little he knew about cars. She treated him exactly as she would treat any other customer. At one point, Jalen stopped and looked at her with confusion. Why are you being so nice to me? The question hit Victoria harder than she expected. What do you mean? I mean, look at me. I'm wearing a hoodie in a place where people spend more on cars than my mom makes in 5 years. I probably look like I'm here to steal something. Victoria was quiet for a moment. She thought about Marcus, about that afternoon 3 months ago, about all the assumptions she had made without even realizing she was making them. Can I tell you something, Jalen? He nodded, wary, but curious. A few months ago, I would have treated you exactly the way you expected to be treated. I would have looked at your clothes and made a decision about who you were without ever asking your name. Jalen's expression shifted. What changed? I met someone who taught me that I had it all wrong, that the way you treat people when you think they have nothing to offer says everything about who you really are. She looked him directly in the eyes. I was a terrible person, Jalen. I hurt people. I dismissed them. I made them feel small because I thought it made me bigger. And then someone showed me what I had become, and I had to choose. Keep being that person, or try to be someone better. Jalen was silent for a long moment. So you're like, in recovery or something. But for being a jerk. Victoria laughed, surprised by his directness. I guess you could say that. Jalen smiled for the first time since he had walked in. That's actually pretty cool. Most people just stay jerks forever. Most people don't get the chance I got, or they get it and waste it. So don't waste it, Jalen said simply. That's what my grandma always says. Don't waste the chances you get because not everybody gets them. Victoria felt tears threatening. This teenage boy in a faded hoodie had just summarized everything she had been trying to understand for 3 months. Your grandma sounds wise. She is. She raised me after my parents. Well, you know. She's the reason I came here today. What do you mean? Jalen looked around the showroom, his eyes distant. She's sick. Cancer. The doctors say she doesn't have much time left, and her whole life she's been saving money. Working 2 jobs. Barely spending anything on herself. And you know what she told me last week? Victoria waited. She said she wants to see me in a nice car before she goes. Not buy one, just see me in one. So I can know what it feels like. So I can remember that feeling and work toward it. Victoria's heart cracked open. She said that, yeah, crazy right, she's dying. And all she's thinking about is me. About my future. About giving me something to hold on to when she's gone. Victoria turned and looked across the showroom. Her eyes found the silver sports car, the same one Marcus had touched 3 months ago. The same one she had forbidden him to touch. Come with me, she said. She led Jalen to the car and opened the driver's side door. Get in. Jalen stared at her. What? Get in. Sit behind the wheel. Feel what it's like. But I can't. I'm not going to buy it. I can't even afford the insurance on something like this. I know. That's not the point. The point is that your grandmother wants you to know what it feels like. So get in, and then you can tell her about it. Jalen looked at her, then at the car, then back at her. Slowly, carefully, as if the vehicle might shatter. If he moved too quickly, he lowered himself into the driver's seat. His hands gripped the steering wheel. His eyes scanned the dashboard, the leather seats, the technology that surrounded him. His expression transformed from caution to wonder. "This is incredible," he breathed. It's like sitting in the future." Victoria leaned against the doorframe. "How does it feel?" "Like anything is possible. Like if I work hard enough someday, I could actually have something like this." "Then hold on to that feeling. Remember it. And when things get hard, when people tell you that you can't do something, think about this moment." Jalen sat in the car for a long time. He adjusted the mirrors. He touched the controls. He imagined the engine roaring to life beneath him. When he finally climbed out, his eyes were wet. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick. "I don't know why you did this, but thank you." Victoria put her hand on his shoulder. "Promise me something, Jalen." "What?" "Promise me that when you make it, when you're successful, and people respect you, you'll remember this day, and you'll do for someone else what I just did for you." Jalen nodded slowly. "I promise." "Good. Now go home and tell your grandmother everything. Don't leave out a single detail." He walked toward the exit, then stopped and turned around. "Hey, Victoria." "Yes." "Whoever taught you to be different, tell them thanks. From me." He left, before she could respond. Victoria stood alone in the showroom, tears streaming down her face. She didn't try to hide them, didn't try to compose herself. She just let them fall. Tyler appeared beside her, concern on his face. "You okay?" "I'm more than okay," she said, wiping her eyes. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." That evening, after the dealership closed, Victoria sat in the break room writing a letter. She had been meaning to write it for weeks, but hadn't known what to say. Now the words flowed easily. "Dear Mr. Thompson, I don't know if you remember a young man named Jalen who visited the dealership today. He wore a hoodie and couldn't afford anything we sell. 3 months ago, I would have ignored him or sent him away. Today, I let him sit in a sports car and dream about his future. His grandmother is dying. She wanted him to know what success feels like before she goes. He promised to remember this day and pay it forward when he makes it. I realized something as I watched him drive away. This is why you gave me a second chance. Not because I deserved it. Not because forgiveness is easy. But because the ripples of kindness travel further than we can ever see. That young man will remember what happened today. He'll carry it with him through every struggle, every setback, every moment when someone tells him he can't. And someday, when he's in a position to lift someone else up, he will. Because he knows what it feels like to be lifted. You lifted me, Mr. Thompson, when I was at my lowest, when I had destroyed everything I had built. You opened a door and challenged me to walk through it. I'm still walking. I don't know where this path leads, but I know I'm not the same person who stood in that showroom 3 months ago dripping with contempt, blind to my own cruelty. I'm becoming someone new. Someone better. Someone my father would have been proud of. Thank you doesn't feel like enough. But it's all I have. With gratitude, Victoria Sterling. She sealed the letter and left it on Marcus's desk before she went home. The next morning, Marcus found the letter waiting for him. He read it twice, then folded it carefully and placed it in his wallet. He carried it with him for years. On the 1-year anniversary of that afternoon, Marcus called a company meeting. Everyone gathered in the conference room, the same room where Victoria had faced her reckoning 12 months before. Marcus stood at the head of the table and looked around at the faces before him. Tyler, now senior salesperson. Robert, recently retired, but invited back for this occasion. Rachel, who had become like a sister to him. And Victoria seated near the front, her posture confident, her eyes clear. "A year ago today," Marcus began, "I walked into this dealership wearing work clothes and was told I didn't belong here. A year ago today, I was handed a list of used car dealerships and asked to leave. A year ago today, security was called to escort me out of a building I owned." The room was silent. I could have responded with anger, with revenge, with the kind of vindictive justice that would have felt good for about 5 minutes and then left everyone empty. He paused. Instead, I chose something harder. I chose to believe that people could change, that even in the darkest moments, there was light waiting to be found. That redemption was possible for anyone willing to do the work. His eyes found Victoria. I want to share something with you. Something I received last night. He pulled out his phone and read from the screen. Dear Mr. Thompson, my name is Jalen Williams. You don't know me, but Victoria told me to write to you and say thank you. A year ago, she let me sit in a car I couldn't afford and dream about my future. She told me about you, about what you taught her, about second chances. My grandmother passed away 6 months ago, but before she went, I told her about that day at the dealership, about how someone saw me when everyone else looked right through me. She cried. She said that was all she ever wanted for me. To be seen, to be valued, to know I mattered. I'm starting college next month, full scholarship, studying business. My grandmother's savings are paying for my textbooks. I don't know what the future holds, but I know this. When I make it, and I will make it, I'm going to do for someone else what Victoria did for me. And what you did for her. The ripples keep going. Thank you, Jalen Williams. Marcus lowered his phone. The room was completely still. Victoria was crying. Tyler was crying. Even Robert, the tough old veteran who claimed he hadn't cried in 30 years, was wiping his eyes. This is why we do what we do. Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. Not for the sales, not for the numbers, not for the bottom line. We do it for the Jalens of the world, for the people who walk through our doors carrying dreams they're afraid to speak out loud. He looked around the room. Every person who enters this building has a story. They have struggles we know nothing about, victories we've never heard of, dreams that matter just as much as ours. He walked toward the window, the same window where he had stood a year ago. My father told me something when I was young. He said, "Son, the way you treat people when you think no one important is watching reveals everything about who you really are." He turned to face them. I've carried those words with me my whole life, through every success, through every failure, through every moment when it would have been easier to be cruel than kind. His eyes found Victoria's. A year ago, I watched Victoria make a terrible mistake, and then I watched her face the consequences with courage I didn't expect. I watched her choose the harder path. I watched her transform from someone who judged books by their covers into someone who reads every page. Victoria held his gaze, tears still flowing. That transformation wasn't because of me. It was because of her. Because she decided that who she had been wasn't who she wanted to be. Because she did the work, every day, without excuses, without shortcuts. Marcus walked to where Victoria sat and extended his hand. Stand up. Victoria rose, confused. Marcus turned to address the room. Effective today, Victoria Sterling is being promoted to General Manager of Prestige Auto Gallery. A gasp rippled through the room. Victoria's hand flew to her mouth. She has earned this position through demonstrated excellence, genuine growth, and unwavering commitment to the values we stand for. She will report directly to me, and she will have full authority over all operations. He turned to Victoria, whose face was a mask of shock and emotion. You once asked me why I gave you a second chance. I told you it was because someone gave me one, but that was only part of the answer. He placed his hands on her shoulders. The full answer is this. I saw in you the same potential that Frank Morrison saw in me, the same fire, the same hunger, the same capacity for growth. You just needed someone to believe in you long enough for you to start believing in yourself. Victoria was shaking, tears streaming down her face. I don't deserve this, she whispered. Stop saying that, Marcus replied firmly. You've spent a year proving you deserve this. You've mentored staff. You've transformed customer relationships. You've built a culture of respect and dignity that didn't exist before. He released her shoulders and stepped back. You deserve this, Victoria. Now go out there and prove me right. Again. The room erupted in applause. Tyler was the first to hug her, followed by Rachel, then Robert, then a flood of colleagues who had watched her journey from the lowest point to this moment. Marcus stepped back and watched. This was what it was all about. Not the money, not the prestige, not the power. This, right here. A woman who had lost her way, finding it again. A community coming together to celebrate redemption. A story that would ripple outward in ways none of them could predict. He thought about his father, about Frank Morrison, about all the people who had shaped him. He thought about Destiny, now a freshman in college, calling him every week to share her adventures and ask for advice. He thought about Jalen studying business, preparing to change the world. And he thought about Victoria standing in the middle of that room, surrounded by people who believed in her. Change was possible. Redemption was real. And every person who walked through those doors deserved to be treated with dignity, respect, and care. Marcus slipped out of the conference room, quietly leaving the celebration behind. He walked through the showroom, past the gleaming cars and the polished floors, out into the California sunshine. He climbed into his old truck, the same one he had driven that day a year ago. The same worn boots, the same calloused hands, the same man who had been judged and dismissed and asked to leave. But everything was different now, because he had chosen grace over vengeance, growth over destruction, hope over despair. He started the engine and pulled out of the parking lot, heading home to his daughter, to his life, to the future he had built one brick at a time. Behind him, Prestige Auto Gallery stood in the afternoon light, no longer just a place to buy cars. It was a place where second chances were given, where assumptions were challenged, where every person who walked through the door was seen valued and respected. Because that was the legacy Marcus Thompson had chosen to build. And that was the legacy that would outlast them all. The way you treat people when you think no one important is watching reveals everything about who you really are.